Somewhere off the coast of Bangladesh, a ship the length of 3 football fields is making its final approach. Not to a port, but to a beach. You would think a vessel worth tens of millions would get a dignified end. But here is the secret. The moment it hits that sand, it enters one of the most profitable industrial operations on Earth. One that quietly processes over 90% of the world's dying fleet using handheld gas torches and $5 an hour labor. A handful of yard owners in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, names you have never heard, invisibly control the final fate of ships that once powered the global economy. So why would billion-dollar shipping companies hand over their assets to someone dismantling them on an open beach? And what happens when shadow fleets, international sanctions, and tightening regulations threaten to choke the only system keeping the ocean from becoming a graveyard of abandoned ships? To understand this, we have to start with an uncomfortable truth about the ship recycling business that almost nobody talks about. A ship does not just stop working one day. It gets slowly strangled by economics. After roughly 25 to 30 years at sea, the hull is fatigued, the engine is inefficient by modern standards, and the cost of a mandatory special survey can run into the millions. For most owners, that bill is the end of the calculation. The ship stops being an asset and becomes a liability overnight. But here is where it gets interesting. The owner does not pay to get rid of it. Someone pays them. That is the foundational logic of shipbreaking. A yard owner, or a network of intermediaries, buys the vessel not to sail it, but to destroy it. And the reason that trade makes sense comes down to one thing: steel. A large cargo ship is essentially a floating steel mine. Around 80 to 95% of its recyclable mass is high-grade steel that has already been smelted, shaped, and treated. In Europe, that steel is classified as hazardous waste. In India or Bangladesh, it is a raw material feeding construction booms worth hundreds of billions of dollars. That difference in perception is what makes the entire industry possible. But the financial accounting is just the appetizer. The main course is understanding exactly how the money moves and who takes the risk at each step. Almost no shipping company sells directly to a scrapyard. Instead, they sell to a specialized middleman called a cash buyer. Cash buyers are the quiet architects of the ship recycling trade. They pay the ship owner up front, take ownership of the vessel, and resell it to a specific yard at a markup, typically $20 to $50 per light displacement ton of steel. On a 20,000-ton vessel, that is a quiet profit of $400,000 to $1 million for a few weeks of paperwork and risk. The ship owner gets a clean exit. The cash buyer takes on market risk. And the yard owner gets the steel, but only if the numbers work. Here is the core equation every yard owner lives and dies by. They buy a ship at a price per light displacement ton. Call it $450. They sell the recovered steel to local rolling mills, the copper wiring to metal traders, and the engines and generators to secondary equipment markets. If total revenue exceeds acquisition cost, plus labor, fuel, and disposal fees, they profit. If steel prices drop below roughly $400 per metric ton, the spread evaporates. Some yards have shut down entirely during downturns because fixed costs could not be covered by scrap sales. It is a volume game with razor-thin margins and enormous commodity exposure. Now, here is what most people do not know. The geography of shipbreaking is not an accident. It is a precise economic calculation. The 3 dominant clusters, Alang in India, Chattogram in Bangladesh, and Gadani in Pakistan, exist because of factors almost impossible to replicate elsewhere. First, tidal ranges. The Gulf of Khumbat near Alang has tidal swings of up to 12 meters, acting as a free natural dry dock. A ship sails in at high tide, beaches itself at full engine power, and when the tide retreats, it is sitting on solid ground. Gravity does the work that a billion-dollar facility would do in Hamburg. Second, proximity to demand. India feeds over 6 million metric tons of scrap steel annually into its rolling mills from shipbreaking alone. Bangladesh meets roughly 40% of its entire domestic steel demand through recycled ship steel from Chattogram yards. Third, and most uncomfortably, labor costs. Workers in South Asian yards earn wages that are a fraction of what their counterparts in Turkey or Europe would demand. A ship that takes 6 months to dismantle in a German dry dock can be stripped to nothing in Alang in 8 weeks. Around these clusters, entire parallel economies have emerged. Within kilometers of the beach, workshops and traders specialize in secondhand ship components, doors, generators, navigation equipment, kitchen fittings, and furniture. Every bolt, every pipe fitting, every engine part becomes a sellable product. The yard gate is just the beginning of the commerce. But here's where the story gets more complicated. Owning a ship graveyard is not a license to print money. The risks are brutal, the costs are rising, and a massive new problem has arrived that nobody fully knows how to solve. Start with costs. A yard owner needs waterfront land, cranes, cutting equipment, and fuel. Where environmental compliance is required, they need impermeable floors, contained drainage, and certified hazardous waste handlers. Compliance adds real expense. Asbestos removal alone, present in nearly every ship built before 2000, can cost $150 to $200 per metric ton processed. On a large vessel, that bill can exceed $1 million before a single steel plate is sold. Safety is the other hidden liability. Shipbreaking ranks among the most dangerous industrial occupations on Earth. Workers face falling steel sections, explosions from residual fuel vapor, and long-term toxic exposure. When accidents happen, and they do regularly, they attract NGO attention and legal scrutiny from foreign regulators. The pressure is real and building. The Hong Kong Convention, which entered into force in 2025, creates a binding legal framework for certified yards. Major lines like Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd have committed to compliant facilities only. For yard owners who invest in upgraded infrastructure, this is a competitive advantage. For those who do not, it is an existential threat. And then there's the shadow fleet problem, where ship-breaking economics collide with geopolitics in a way nobody planned for. Sanctions on Russian, Iranian, and Venezuelan oil exports have created a vast parallel fleet of tankers operating outside normal regulatory channels. Old, poorly maintained, and often far beyond retirement age, these are exactly the vessels that should be flowing into breaking yards. But here's the killer. Once a vessel or its owner is sanctioned, the normal scrap transaction collapses. Banks refuse to clear payments. Insurers withdraw coverage. Classification societies pull their certificates. Cash buyers who engage with sanctioned entities risk violating international law, and letters of credit are routinely refused for flagged vessels. The result is a growing pool of decrepit tankers that can't be legally recycled, can't be economically operated, and sit at anchor, rusting, leaking, a slow-moving environmental disaster. For legitimate yard owners, this is a double frustration. A pipeline of lucrative scrap is locked behind a wall they cannot legally cross, while incidents involving these vessels trigger fresh regulatory crackdowns on the entire recycling industry. So, what is next? The long-term demand picture is actually strong. Decarbonization rules are making vessels built in the 1990s and the 2000s increasingly uncompetitive, and a significant wave of retirements is forecast through the end of this decade. But the battle over how that scrapping happens is intensifying. Policy think tanks are pushing for targeted sanctions exemptions that would create a controlled, legal pathway to get dangerous ships off the water. Others argue states should have the power to seize and recycle demonstrably unseaworthy shadow fleet vessels before they cause catastrophic spills. For yard owners who have invested in green infrastructure and compliance certification, this transition is an opportunity. For those still operating on open beaches with no containment systems, the window is narrowing. The economics are shifting from pure commodity arbitrage toward a model where certification and reputational standing increasingly determine who gets the ships and who does not. Don't forget to like and subscribe.